I never thought I wanted to be a filmmaker. Filmmaking found me at a time where I was just exploring various different interests. I started out in the fine art world in printmaking and sculpture. And when I was at the University of Virginia, I decided to take some cinematography, 16 millimeter cinematography classes by a filmmaker named Kevin Jerome Everson. And he really initiated my interest in 16 millimeter filmmaking, and I've just been making films ever since.
Boy, I've been watching you like a hawk in the sky that flies, and you were my prey.
Especially with 60 millimeter films and short films, I think, there is a special audience for it, right? It's more limited than mainstream cinema. Would you do those films still if no one saw them?
Absolutely. I consider my films personal cinema. I try to focus more about, they're kind of like little sketchbooks. My short films are like little sketchbooks for me. I consider the audience and that it could possibly show at like a festival or a museum or gallery space, but usually I'm just kind of concerned about telling stories and things that matter to me. So if no one really saw them, or even if I went commercial and started making big budget films, I think I would always return back to these kind of short experimental films.
Do you follow mainstream cinema at all? Are you
Not
invested
really. I'm really not a cinephile, and it's so funny because, I make films, but I don't I have a Netflix account and I don't watch films, it's really bad.
Right.
I'm horrible at it, but I'm terrible. But when I do, there are specific filmmakers that I love. A lot of filmmakers like Apisha Pong inspires me, because he divides his time between the film world and the art world. Steve McQueen, of course. So, there are some filmmakers that I look up to that kind of inspire me to keep working. Yeah.
No, it's nice because, again, a few people that we interviewed, they are really not cinephiles, and it shows in the films, though. It's not, you don't really follow a formula, or you don't see, well, how can I relate to my audience the best? It's really about the work and the work itself, which shows, and it's refreshing, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I do agree with you. I think coming from the fine art world, I use this film as a tool for making art, and it's like any other medium, whether it's painting on a canvas or, cinema, it just gives you that kind of access to expose various different, it's like a window to a world, and there's so many possibilities through editing, sound design, and my collaborators who I collaborate with, they're usually friends or people who are close to me, it's kind of nice when you have that kind of intimacy with the collaborators to produce something that will expose people to something new.
Right.
Yeah.
You've mentioned that if you got a great gig and then maybe did a feature film, big budget production, where do you see yourself going? Not only with the 60 millimeter projects, but in general. Do you want to keep exploring different things, or do you say, well, no, if I got the possibility to do a big thing, I would really go for that?
Yeah, my ultimate goal is to make a feature film. I would love to work with actors, and my upcoming film that I'm working on is an adaptation of a short story by an African author. So I do feel that I'm moving more towards fictional narrative. So in hopes of possibly as a precursor to maybe making a feature film. So yeah, I'm writing more with my experimental films, and I kind of have a documentary approach where I'm constantly shooting, and so through the editing process is when we start to develop the narrative and the story. And now that I'm doing more fictional narrative, I'm like writing and rewriting and working with, getting feedback from script doctors, that sort of thing, to kind of help me create a more cohesive narrative as opposed to thinking so abstractly in like these kinds of experimental films, right? So it is kind of interesting that it has its own kind of language when you're making a traditional or conventional narrative film, which is my ultimate goal. So I'm hoping that I can get there. You know, I work from a space, like my films, I call them my triple consciousness, and I use this space as like a metaphor for exploration of like various different identities, whether it's belonging or home, and searching for a place. And I usually use that as my focal point for every film or idea that I come up with. And so I think I'm drawn to narratives and stories that work or deal with this searching for belong or place. And so, I mean, with like just recently, I shot a film in Vietnam. I had no idea I was going to go to Vietnam, right. But I had been looking at the work of Trinity Minha, who is ethnographic filmmaker. She made a film called Reassemblage, From the Firelight to the Screen. Mm-hmm. And so I had one of my good friends, she was traveling to Vietnam for the first time, and I thought, why don't I do a Ghanaian-American filmmaker's rendering of this Vietnamese American's film in Vietnam. So, you know, it just, I allow kind of stories to kind of fall into my lap, and I just allow it to take me there. You know, I don't really like to plan too much because I find, I don't want to say my work is completely intuitive because that's not true, but I want to say that I trust my gut or my intuition when it comes to being drawn to create something. That's the space where I find that I thrive the most. So in terms of like a fictional narrative, you know, like the short film that the upcoming feature or fiction that I'm working on now, this was a short story that came to me from my friend who's in Reluctantly Queer, in the film that I have here at the festival, and he gave me this book of short stories by this author, and I read them, and one of them I had this immediate connection to, and I'm like, oh, I have to adapt this somehow into a film. I just see it. And so I approached the author, and with my work, she got to know my work, and she said, okay, sure, I'll give you the rights to translate my story into a fiction. So again, it wasn't quite planned. It was a more organic process, which I like, you know. It's just kind of, how do I make a new work? I just allow myself to be open, kind of how my films are. Yeah.
If you have any advice that you maybe got from somebody, a mentor or someone close to you, you know, that you could give fellow artists on the way, you know, maybe a mantra that you live by, or something that you hold on to that you know I'm on the right path, you know, what would that be? Or do you have something like that you could share with us?
I guess to say it simply, you know, I remember like I used to just always complain. I still complain, but I used to always complain about how, you know, filmmaking is so difficult and challenging, and you know, every emerging filmmaker is always like, oh man, you know, like I'm never gonna make it. It's so hard. And a great professor told me, you know, just make the work, just focus on the work, and the rest will come. You know, I used to be like, oh, I'm not so articulate, you know, I don't have the right language. And he's like, okay, so let other people talk about the work and just make the work. And when I looked at it that way, I thought, oh yeah, okay, so I just have to make good work. And if I make the work, you know, people will respond to it. So I think that's all one thing that I always try and focus on. It's just not focus on the attention aspect, not focus on the extras, and just really just what is it that you want to say. And filmmaking is that tool that I use to communicate with the rest of the world.